Well, hello! This is the second part to a much longer reaction. If you haven't seen them yet, links to them are in the description as well in the top corner of the video. Now, with that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
It's magic! And this is where the story really starts focusing in on the prophecy. The fact that Ralsei did know the prophecy this whole time, but like I predicted in the Ralsei video, Ralsei was not telling us all of it. And we finally get to see the rest of the prophecy that presumably the world knows about. And there's not much revealed at the beginning of chapter 4, but it'll get a lot more relevant later on. But then fucking Gerson shows up. Gerson just shows up out of fucking nowhere and is the best character in Deltarune.
Oh god,
I don't
yes,
know
so
how else
much.
to explain it. Wow. The arc that Susie has with Gerson is so fantastic. And it's funny because I think like the old master who seems kooky at first but has like a certain way of teaching lessons and it can still do it. You know, I feel like it's a very tropey thing to pull. But Toby is such a good writer that there wasn't a second of disdain or I've seen this before that I felt in all of Susie's arc with Gerson.
I mean, that is basically how it works. I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard it, but, you know, I've heard many times that it's basically, you know, there's not an original story in human history. Everything is some sort of remix or retelling of some previous story or some aspect of a previous story. Whether people, get tired of it or, you know, or not, it's purely based on the, you know, the actual strength of the writer themselves.
I thought it was so compelling. Gerson is a fantastic character. He's so funny. He and Susie are so sweet together. And the secret boss fight against the Hammer of Justice was a dream come true.
So beautiful.
Toby said that in Deltarune he wanted to sort of revisit some concepts that he couldn't in Undertale, and that's why the fight against Spamton Neo was essentially like the fight against Metaton Neo that everyone wanted. And now we finally get to fight Gerson at his peak when he was the Hammer of Justice, the warrior. And the fact that his theme takes from Undyne's theme, from both of Undyne's themes, from Spear of Justice and Battle Against a True Hero, they're both incorporated into the Hammer of Justice's song is so great. Like, of course, Undyne's Spear of Justice would be based on the Hammer of Justice because she idolized him.
It was so good.
He was a great warrior in Undertale's past. And then also the fight mirroring Undyne's training with Asgore, because Undyne talked about how Asgore trained her in the Royal Guard, and she worked and worked and worked against him, and when she could finally land one hit on him, he was so happy. And this fight is all about Susie trying to
land a hit on him.
On Gerson, and when she finally does, that's when she gets the Shadow Crystal and the hammer from him. God, it's like fucking poetry! So really, everything
Beautiful.
with Gerson, I just found so fantastic. And before I forget,
Jackenstein
is adorable. Jackenstein is the best. I think Jackenstein might be the funniest fight in the game. You know, the production value on Deltarune is climbing so steadily, right? Sometimes you forget that this is the guy who made Undertale. And when I was fighting Jackenstein, I was like, oh yeah, this is Toby Fox. You're taking too long. Everything about the Jackenstein fight was hilarious. Jackenstein is so cute, so funny. So cool how he comes back later in the chapter to help you climb. Oh, and while we're talking about climbing, this might be something that no one else in the world is talking about or cares about. I really like the climbing mechanic in this game. As opposed to all of the other sort of overworld mini games you play in Undertale and Deltarune, the climbing felt really natural with the controls, and I kind of hope that they continue to implement that in future chapters.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I have to agree with them there. They were really good, and obviously, it's the type of thing that, you know, they're a very low skill floor, but very high skill ceiling, especially given that one, puzzle I couldn't fight, especially given that one puzzle that I couldn't get past because I wasn't being quick enough.
Single other person praising the climbing controls in Deltarune, but I thought it was really nice. I liked it, and of course it makes for a great climax where you're climbing the crumbling tower. But anyways, getting ahead of myself once again, once you find a knight, they escape through another great door into the other room of the church, and you close the fountain. Oh, and while I'm talking about that, the fact that you can leave Dark Worlds through great doors is another big revelation, and it sort of disproves a lot of what I was saying about Castletown in my Ralsei theory, because as it turns out, sealing Dark fountains is not the only way to leave them. Great doors represent doors in the real world, it seems like, and so when you go through the Great Door from Castletown to the Card Kingdom, obviously, I think
you're going from one dark world to the other, yeah.
Was us going through the door from the closet to the classroom. But now we know that a Great Door can be an exit to a dark world, like when Chris and Susie walk through one at the end of Chapter 3, they just exit the house, and then a Great Door represents a separation between two rooms in the church. So that's interesting. We now know that dark fountains can be left as long as you find the Great Door. But anyways, Chris and Susie seal the dark fountain.
Which still makes the Castletown one special, given that instead of going through a Great Door to get back into the school proper, you're kind of like being sucked up into that portal, which we see. It's weird because the only place we see that is, in the Castletown. And also there's, again, I was kind of spoiled in this one, but I know in Chapter 4 you can potentially find another one that leads you, in the church, mind you, that leads you back to Castletown where you fight Mike. So I wonder how that works into the lore.
They're back in like the church entry hall, and the reveal that Gerson was actually, the old man was actually Gerson's hammer covered in his dust that Alvin had kept in his drawer I think everyone was assuming that, right? But the fact that Susie understands is such a good moment, because again, so many people were thinking that Susie just wasn't going to comprehend how Dark Worlds worked until later on in the story. The fact that she finds this and she understands what Gerson was, I think is such a good choice, because it makes for like such a gut punch for her character, and also sets up this mechanic for further on in the story. Because
yeah, it's that whole thing where for the longest time, like, again, maybe it's like just, fan theory sliding towards fan fiction, and I could possibly see also just from like fandom flanderization from a lack of new content that, people were kind of assuming that, Susie was dumb. And she's not as dumb as she looks.
If Gerson could be resurrected by the fountain, Ralsei comes in later and says that fountains resurrecting loved one doesn't always work, but that absolutely sets up the possibility that other people will try to get resurrected with fountains in the future, like Noelle and Rudy, as I theorized in Seven Nights. And then another thing I theorized about comes true, and that is, against all odds, despite the entire theory being wrong, Susie does make a dark world in Chapter 4. She reopens a dark world to find the old man again and ask Gerson how to get through the door. And the second sanctuary
Okay, honestly, I know why he looks so stupid. It's because he's turned at a 3/4, like, he's turned at a 3/4 perspective, where we're only used to, like, characters being able to look at, like, one of, like, either straight ahead, like, up, down, left, and right. And I saw that it was the same where there was a couple of times where you have Noelle in Chapter 4 kind of standing at 3/4 or sitting at 3/4 looking at something, where the characters, since we're not used to, like, since we've literally never seen them from that perspective before, they look really weird.
You enter is so cool. I think the revelation that you can open another dark world in the same place, but it's not going to be the same because a different person made it, is so fascinating. It opens up so many possibilities for the future as well, because it's the same in many ways. It's a reflection of the other dark world, but so many things are different. I think
reflection in literally some place.
Come back to life in Susie's fountain maybe speaks to the fact that she really didn't know the person that Gerson was before he died very well, so her dark fountain couldn't really match the intent of the knight's dark fountain, which also lends itself to the knight being Des, because Des would have had Gerson as a teacher, so her love for him would have resurrected him in that way and made him a good teacher for Susie, I think. But this is also where we have to fight the Gerson statues. Then Ralsei comes and saves us, and Susie has the big crash out at Ralsei, because we're finally acknowledging in this story that Ralsei knows shit and he does not say anything. Official recognition that Ralsei is constantly lying through a mission. Official acknowledgement from Ralsei himself that he knows the prophecy. He knows things that are going to happen, and he keeps quiet because he doesn't want to upset people. Susie's anger at that is so real and understandable, but her understanding is also so beautiful and so Susie. I think Susie's kindness is really coming through in these chapters, and the fact that she really does want to see the best in people and she doesn't want to be angry is Susie and Ralsei grow so much in Chapter 4. It's insane. Also, in the second sanctuary, we start seeing parts of the prophecy that become a little more relevant. The prophecy is listing out the heroes, and there's the first hero, the cage with human soul and parts, which, first of all, that could be referencing Chris or the vessel.
Yeah,
We'll have to
exactly.
see. There's a third hero, the prince alone in the dark, or whatever it was. But here's the thing that a lot of people have been talking about on Twitter, and I think Spooky Dude may have released a video on it as well, so link in the description.
Another one I need to watch, yeah.
People are starting to suspect that Susie isn't really the second hero from the prophecy. The prophecy is out of order in Susie's Dark World. There are a couple different pieces of the prophecy that mention a girl, right? The second hero, the girl with hope crossed on her heart, and then there's another part that says, and last the girl, at last the girl. And you're supposed to think these pieces of the prophecy are talking about the same girl, the same second hero, but they're out of order. And the girl with hope crossed on her heart would have been talked about second, and then another girl is talked about at last. There's a fourth main character, per se, of the prophecy. And obviously, I think the popular opinion is that it's Noelle. But now we need to reckon with, is Susie the girl with hope crossed on her heart and Noelle the other girl? Or is it the other way around? Is Noelle the second hero?
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually... Have I said this in a video yet? I can't remember. But, like, it's very obvious here that... The prophecy was supposed to happen in a certain way, and Rouse has said that even if the prophecy is broken, it will come true eventually itself. It'll just kind of move. So the fact that potentially the prophecy was talking about us taking control of the vessel, you know, human soul with and parts, and then took us out and put us in the Chris, it shows that somebody is screwing, or at least trying to screw up the not the fantasy, the prophecy in some way. And whether that's Gaster or somebody else, like, trying to fight against the Knight, or they're doing it to help the Knight in some way, again, we have to see.
And Gerson's dialogue in his fight makes it all the more clear that Susie might not be one of the heroes. When she asks which character of Dragon Blazer she is, he says she's the dragon. And that's another revelation, that Dragon Blazers was based on Lord of the Hammer, was based on the prophecy. There's this whole theme of fiction derived from other pieces of fiction that threads its way all through Chapter 4. That's really fascinating. There was already a lot of discussion that the plot details of Dragon Blazers would end up aligning with the plot details of Deltarune. But now, not only
now we know it's quite literal, yeah.
We also have the fact that these aren't one-to-one copies of each other, they're adaptations of each other. Things change in adaptations.
It's not just adaptations, it's adaptations of adaptations. So, like, so the whole thing is, like, it's just basically just one giant game of broken telephone. Like, even Gaster said himself, the prophecy that their religion has, that their religion has access to, might not even be the original one. There might have been, like, parts and stuff lost just to time that weren't kept up, or were lost in translation or stuff like that.
Things changed to suit the medium or the story the new author wanted to tell, which is
that
also
too.
what held Alvin back from writing the end to Lord of the Hammer. But I digress. Then there are other pieces of the prophecy that we see, like the Flower Man trapped in asylum or something. I think it says that, which seems to confirm, along with Gerson, that the flower shop is probably going to be the next chapter's Dark World location, and Asgore is probably going to play a major role in it. The heroes will see the Tail of Hell take crawl, and the Tail of Hell is like a bunch of circles together, and that, again, invokes Friend,
I see that one?
because Friend may or may not be a cat from Cat Pedders, one of Noelle's games that she likes to play, which are made out of circles. It's based on, like, an old PC game called Cats, I believe, and the cats were made out of, like, orbs. And so seeing a tail made out of orbs definitely calls attention to Friend. And then there's the part of the prophecy that depicts the angel, and we don't get to see that, but Susie seems disgusted by it. And the conversation I've seen on Twitter, I find really fascinating, is that we can't see it, and the screen where it should be depicted is black. And when the screen is black, you often see yourself reflected in it. So I think that lends a lot of credence to player angel theory.
Okay, so I'm not the only person that's thought of that. Because specifically, I mean, granted, I didn't think of that during the playthrough. I only thought of that at the very end, when you have the little thing with, presumably, Gaster calling us, like, where it says, like, we'll just have to see my Deltarune. And I kind of just, at the end of the video, kind of, like, questioned, like, are we the angels? Is that what's going to happen? So, God, stuff is going to happen. We just have no idea how. It's just putting everything in a blender. Help.
But enough about the prophecy. We get to the climax of the chapter, where we go into the third sanctuary to fight the knight again. And the entire build up to this is so cool. There's this especially poignant moment where Chris, Ralsei, and Susie, they're all walking against like the red wind of the night coming down on them, and swords start coming down, and they start switching places to take the swords for each other. So
wait a second, I wonder.
to protect each other from them. It's so touching. Of course, Toby Fox can pull off a power of friendship moment in the year 2025. It's just beautiful. And then finally, at the end of that and the really cool climbing segment I mentioned earlier, the knight creates a dark fountain inside the dark fountain we're already in. And we have been debating what would happen if you do this for forever. Would it just kickstart the roaring like that? Would it create another darker than dark world?
I mean, granted, I had never heard of these before, but I remember hearing or seeing somebody talking about, like, now that Neo-Dark worlds are, like, out of the picture, where, like, apparently that had been a theory where if you made a dark world and a dark world, you made just a Neo-Dark world that was, like, just harder. So, but apparently, yeah, that was thrown out the window with the Titan.
What happens is the fountain becomes basically an egg. It develops a hard exterior, and a Titan starts to hatch from the inside of the fountain. And we're climbing this fountain as the Titan is hatching from it. It's so fucking cool.
Oh God,
it's so cool. What a climax. It's insane. And finally, we fight the Titan as the Chapter 4 boss. And this is where I realized...
Actually, I'll let you in on a little secret here, and I didn't include it in my Let's Play. Hopefully my editing will hidden the fact. But while I was fighting the Titan, my game crashed. Like, literally, like, the game crashed, and when I reloaded the game, I had to do the climbing section all over again. Granted, I don't know why it crashed. I didn't see any particular reason why, but I was so angry.
Is that there's no pattern we could expect from the future chapters with Deltarune, because we thought fighting a Titan would be in Chapter 7. Maybe.
Yeah.
We thought fighting a Titan would be endgame or possibly after endgame type shit. We're fighting a Titan in Chapter 4. There's no bishop, there's no chess theory, even though this is the church. We're fighting a Titan, and what a cool battle. The music is insane. You're like killing its spawn as they're coming to get you, or rather you're purifying them. And it seems like all hope is lost until Gerson returns, and fucking Gerson and Susie do a dual buster together, and they fucking, oh god, it's such a good moment.
It was so much fun.
Comes in with Gerson's theme, they start working together, and then Susie decides to fucking slam dunk Chris into the Titan's face and purify it from the inside. What a climax. Holy shit, so cool. But it's not even over then. After the Titan is defeated, Susie runs forward looking for the old man. Ralsei doesn't get a chance to go before her because he's been trying to protect them from seeing the full prophecy this whole time. And then Susie sees the last panel of the prophecy, and we don't get to see it, but Susie shatters it with her hand, and her hand is bleeding. And Ralsei can do nothing but apologize because of what she's just seen.
And again, the whole fact that Susie was bleeding. Again, so either there's something weird going on with Susie there, because I think I saw a video somewhere where the thumbnail talked about Susie being like a half-breed or something like that, or there's some like reality or some fact of monster biology that we've just not been exposed to this point, and might make the whole thing with Sans bleeding at the end of the genocide route in Undertale that much less weird, or something like that. I don't know if you're able to hear that over the mic, but there's a lot of banging coming from downstairs. God. Yeah, the insurance is working again today, and God, water damage is a bitch.
Susie comforts Ralsei. Susie isn't succumbing to the despair herself. Susie puts her bloodied hand on Ralsei's face and tries to calm him down. What a moment. What an emotional moment between those two. Again, Susie and Ralsei grow so much in Chapter 4. They're my favorite characters in the game now, to be honest. And as Susie walks off screen and you talk to Ralsei, and you see revealed on the character portrait that there's blood on his face is so, it's moving, it's profound, it feels so significant, it feels vulnerable and imposing at once, and we get the
which, something I have to question here, and again, like that, this whole thing is just the sight of Ralsei literally having blood on him, somebody else's blood on him. It's really moving, but just a technical question with the game. Or, lore question, or however you want to see it. Because, like, the whole thing with the talk sprites and stuff like that has always been that Lightner's talk sprites are purely monochromatic, and then the Darkner talk sprites, when they have a talk sprite, they're the ones with colored talk sprites. How would that work with the blood if Susie had touched a Lightner's face? If she had done the same thing with, like, say, Noelle or Birdley, would their otherwise black and white talk sprite have the red of the blood on it? Like, that would be a question I'd want to ask Toby just for clarification there.
The honest truth from Ralsei that he's been trying to fight the prophecy this whole time, which I frankly thought the opposite of. I thought Ralsei was pro-prophecy. He says that he's hoped that if they were just nice enough that they could somehow change the ending of the prophecy, but that it seems to be coming no matter what. And we don't know what that is. Personally, there are a few routes I think it could take, and they all involve one or more of the Fun Gang dying. There's the idea that Susie would have to sacrifice herself, or that Ralsei would have to, or Chris. I think if the idea that Noelle creates the Angel's Heaven is true, I think there's the possibility that maybe they would have to kill Noelle, or maybe all three or all four of them have to die. It's unclear at the moment, but the text that reads on screen when at the Dark Fountain right before you seal it, it's maybe my favorite few lines in the game. Susie's smile, which seemed to defeat everything, shined on in front of you, and for a moment, it was as if all the darkness had been blown away. That moment, I think that moment cemented Susie as my favorite character in Deltarune. What a couple of lines. It was so affecting, and it really sets up the pieces for where the story's going from here. Because now we know that there's a prophecy. There are different allegiances working for different reasons, and we don't know them all, but we know that Susie and Ralsei want to change the ending. And we finally know that Deltarune's one ending that we've talked about for so long, it's not just a meta element, it's not just a clarification for the Undertale fans that this game isn't going to have one ending. It's a problem that the characters in the game themselves need to face.
One ending? Question mark? God, yeah.
I think that's such a good direction to start taking this story. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Then when Chris and Susie leave the church at the end, the song that plays is called The Place Where It Rained. It's raining somewhere else, but with Sans' theme removed from it. Just the place where it rained. And I think if anyone doubted that Sans Undertale is in fact Sans Deltarune, I think the writing is on the wall here. And after that emotional climax, after all the feelings that this game has been forcing you through, you get home and the jitterbug scene is happening. And let me be real with you, I was a bit...
thrown off?
I was so upset about this scene, I accidentally caused a Twitter discourse over it, I fear. Because, so first of all, the Sorial of it all is great. Sans and Toriel, great couple. Very funny to see them dancing like that. I think my opinion of Toriel's parental skills went from 100 to 0 in that moment. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, I hate Toriel now and Toriel's a bad person. But, the facts here are, Toriel's child has been out since before the storm started. It is past 1 a.m. You know that from the soundtrack names. They have not communicated with you at all
day, yeah.
Time. And you're home getting drunk with the grocery store man you met 2 days ago. Is that not insane? I feel like a lot of people are shrugging it off like, yeah, let a single mom have some fun, whatever, who cares? I don't care that she's dancing with Sans. She can dance with Sans and get drunk all she wants. The fact is she has not communicated with her child, and she knows that there's a goddamn tire slasher on the loose in the neighborhood. It's jarring. And to the game's credit, I think it's supposed to be very jarring, especially Susie reacting to the fact that Toriel's drunk and wanting to leave. I think that's pretty indicative of the kinds of problems she's facing at home.
Yeah, again, that was one of the other things that I saw on Twitter. And I saw so many fan edits where, like, Chris walks, like, the cutscene plays out, Susie leaves, and then Chris walks up the sands, and then the genocide battle happens. And just, again, it's one of those things where, it could partially be, you know, just the fans loving Toriel, and also just, you know, the love that they have from Undertale and stuff like that. You know, it's the whole thing that's like, people have joked, oh, Asgore was a bad father and stuff like that, but Toriel's not a perfect mother either. And this, again, like, everything cammyboiG is saying is absolutely true. Just, like, the fact that, like, her one child, her only child that's here, has been out all day, seemingly in the rain, with a potential slasher, quote-unquote, on the loose, and they do nothing, and now she's and instead of that, she's at home getting drunk, dancing with a guy she met a couple of days ago. Yeah, I mean, again, if there wasn't enough proof before that Toriel is not the perfect mother that the fandom had been painting her as, it was right here.
And I truly hope that the game addresses this moving forward, because I appreciate it. I like that Toriel's flaws are coming to the surface here, because she does feel like sort of infallible at points. And the fact that she's done something this callous, I think, is really fascinating and a good step for her character. And then Chris goes to bed, and God, maybe this hit too close to home for me as like a kid whose family was often too loud when they were trying to go to bed, but when Sans and Toriel kept making noise while Chris was trying to go the fuck to sleep, I got mad. But it ends with Chris looking at Susie out the window, and with a voice coming from Chris's phone again saying that they promised something. What a cliffhanger. Is it the knight? Is it Carol? We really don't know. Are they the same? What did Chris promise? Chris's promise has to be what led them to make the fountain, but what's the goal here? Are they happy about what they're doing? So many questions. So many beautiful questions. So many new questions. So many old questions answered, and so many new questions that I can't wait to start thinking more in depth about. Next, I wanted to talk about the egg rooms, because the egg rooms these chapters are fucking bizarre, especially chapter 3's. And this was another place where my expectations were just thrown out the window, because, honest to God, I thought the egg rooms would continue to be the exact same shit every chapter.
Again, it's that whole thing, sort of, again, with, like, the little, like, the little, like, black shards and stuff like that, where we didn't know why we were collecting them. It's like with the eggs, we don't know why we were collecting them. But then apparently, like, we get all this stuff that just points like, oh god, there's more stuff going on here that we didn't know. Help! And also, just chapter 3 and chapter 4's ones are just so much more difficult to get, where, well, I guess sort of more difficult. There's not as much RNG, I'll say, because I've tried, like, I've played literal hours, and I've never been able to get chapters 1 or 2's, you know, egg trees to appear. It's like, even though just going back and forth, it was so monotonous, I just had to stop.
Just like a room between rooms and a tree and an egg, and that's it. But these two egg rooms offer so much more than that. First of all, let's talk about how to even get to the Chapter 3
Oh god, yeah.
So all the way on the left of the map in Chapter 3, there's a little mini game where you have to switch X's to O's as Lancer, but there's just this random block sitting there, so you have to switch to Susie, who has the throwing ability, and then throw that block over the river on the right side of the screen in the game. But that's all you do there. Then later, on the far side of the map to the right, there's this spotlight that leads to a treasure chest that has like 1 point in it or some shit. And it feels super out of place. So when you walk into this spotlight, a remote guy jumps out
Zapper.
And he asks where you were trying to go. And if you answer nowhere, then he takes you to a place, I guess, called nowhere, where there's another game to play. And this actually really frustrated me on my first playthrough, because I found nowhere, but I had already beaten the Mantle side quest at that point, and once you do that, all the games get shut off and you can't play them anymore. But anyway, you play this game with a Bibliox, an enemy from Chapter 4, for some reason. and you're able to find the ticket that one of the Pippins is earlier on alludes to. You check this ticket in your inventory and it tells you to go left at the X or some shit. And then if you go find a Ribic enemy and get in a fight with it, I think the blow all action, the one that also helps you with, the way these things normally work is like if there's an act you can do that is the same as a normal act, but it works on a whole group, it's blank X. But now the X in the name of this act is red, and you hold left here, and then you show up at this Game Boy ass place.
Which again, the whole thing is like you walk away, but it's the Undertale running away animation where the heart grows legs and starts walking away. Like it's so like what is it supposed to mean? Because with that and in chapter 4 where oh god, I'm forgetting the name of the enemy. It's like the bell thing. But where one of the actions you do on it is tune up, where you're supposed to hit like a tuning fork. But the aiming reticle for the tuning fork is the Undertale attack reticule. Like is Toby supposed to tell us here something here, or is that just him reusing assets?
So right away, it's just fucking bizarre. I understand that the egg room in chapter 1, it took some luck to stumble into for the first time, but once you know where it is, it's relatively simple. This one has you jumping through goddamn hoops, and you find yourself in this place called Man Country, where there are 6 tiny Rudens just hanging around, and they tell you that their backstory is they're the 7 flying aces, because apparently Chris, when they were a kid, they were bad at card games, so they copied 7 aces, or 6 aces, I guess. They weren't good at counting, apparently. But they photocopied 7 aces to win at cards. And apparently they're all different colors because Chris colored them in. Interesting that there are no green ones now that I think about it, considering the whole green crayon thing. But they say that that copies are naturally gray, but Chris colored them in. And that definitely makes my mind wander to Goners. I've been thinking about Goners a lot lately because of their all save video and saying that copies are gray, but you can color them in. That's kind of
suspect.
Something, you know? But anyways, after walking around this place, when you go up, you finally get to the tree for this chapter, and the Eggman finally has a name. I mean, it's not
Forgotten Man
per se, but we can call him something other than Eggman. He is the Forgotten Man.
Or if you say you're going to remember him, just the man.
And all of a sudden, we know so much more than we did about the Eggman, and it still feels like we know nothing. So apparently, the Forgotten Man has been trying to contact Chris about something. And it seems like momentarily meeting him in each chapter and getting an egg from him is his way of communicating with you. But here in the Forgotten Land, or Man Country, or whatever it's called, this is the only place he can talk. This place that I guess is between the couch cushions. And he gives you these cryptic hints on where else to find the eggs in the other chapters, and he hopes to see Chris again. Oh, and it seems like the Forgotten Man is the person who wrote the mysterious Valentine's letter. And I gotta take the L on this one. I really thought it was Gaster, and people just didn't want to let Gaster be a little silly.
God, yeah, I mean, I'm going to miss Goofy Gaster, but I mean, again, like, Cape Johnson lives on in our hearts.
But the way he talks, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think indicates that the letter was from him, and that he somehow is aware of the program Deltarune. Not the religious symbol in universe, but the program itself.
The game.
And then in chapter 4. This one is a lot less
complicated.
Here's the 7th to get
one.
To. You just have to... It's another back and forth between 2 rooms, but this room is considerably more hidden than the other rooms, I feel. But when you go in, it sees Chris entering what seems like a hospital setting. And there's another one of these tiny Rudens there at the desk. Once again referring to itself as a copy. And they can go into this room, and it's completely black, but there's shit to check on and talk to in the room. And it seems like this is art therapy. This was foreshadowed in the Spamton Sweepstakes too, but seeing the full context now, it definitely seems like Chris experienced something traumatic in their childhood and they had to go to art therapy for it. Something in particular that really caught my attention is that you talk to an NPC in this black room and they say, welcome to Welcome to Art Club, where we draw and don't kill each other. And that line about not killing each other has me really thinking. Because the implication of this room is that Chris saw something behind a tree. And they're trying to draw it, but they just can't get themselves to do it. And they draw and draw and draw, and the thing they end up drawing is just a gray smudge, but then they end up painting a tree over it. So there's a lot to connect here about, the bunker, lost where the forest would grow, the kids followed the pointed tail. But this detail, where the NPC says, we don't kill each other here, is really sticking with me, because it feels like it indicates that Chris had some sort of violent episode as a child, or maybe violent tendencies in general, especially because Aram in Chapter 3 make a comment about how the knife grows dull without play, and how Chris is secretly enjoying the things we're making them do on the weird route. Oh, and I haven't even talked about the weird route yet, that'll be next. But it would seem that the Forgotten Man is trying to help Chris remember something that happened in their childhood. And I think there's more theory to be crafted around this whole subject, but that's all I got for now. It is so strange.
Very much so, yeah.
But it's so strange. And now let's talk about the weird route.
Yeah, here we go.
Small changes across the game, and I'm not confident that I know them all right now, but the big change happens in Chapter 4 in the Holiday House segment, and it's disturbing. It is frankly... It's strange because it doesn't have as much of a profound effect on the events of the chapter as it does in Chapter 2, but I'd argue it's even more horrifying. You get this scene where when Chris gets off the couch to go look for the code in Noelle's house, Noelle actually ends up following them because she wants to talk to them privately.
About the weird room in Chapter 2, yeah.
Room and sit on the couch together while, again, the soul is discarded and trapped in the vents. But Noelle starts talking to Chris about this thing that happened last night, apparently, where overnight Chris showed up at their house, independent of our control, of course, and apologized to her and told her it was all just a joke, that they're sorry for taking her watch and that Birdley's going to get better. And Noelle says that Chris spoke to her in their normal voice for the first time in a while. And that paints such a heartbreaking picture for Chris's reaction to the weird route when we can't see them, that they did everything they could to correct what happened. But then Noelle asks Chris if she can talk about something else, and we're given the choice, please don't, or proceed. And by clicking proceed, because your soul is in the menu on the bottom of the screen, when you click proceed, then it is now out of the vent and back in the room with Noelle and Chris.
God, yeah, that was another thing. And like when I was playing before, I was very much questioning like what is going on with the vents here, where like it goes here and then it just ends in a dead end. But the fact when I saw it when somebody was playing the weird route, the fact that the one option leads you to be back in the room with Chris and Noelle, and the other option leads you to be just stuck back in the vents again. Like, that is such a good little detail there. I just love it.
Here's where the weird romantic implications of the weird route especially start coming into play. Noelle's eyes are closed and she starts inching closer to Chris on the couch as she talks about something else that happened last night, how they took her hand and they pulled a thorn out of her finger. And I think part of why Noelle's eyes are closed are for the sake of convenience, so she can't see as you pilot the soul back into Chris's body, but it's hard not to read as if there's sort of a romantic moment she's
leaning in
trying
for a kiss
to
or something
between them. And when she gets really close, she mentions that Chris last night told her not to mention that they did any of this. And Chris starts to freak out and tries to cover her mouth because they know that we're listening to the conversation and we're not supposed to know that Chris did all this last night. But Noelle keeps talking and she asks who Chris thinks is listening. And finally you get the option to respond with me. And then the fucking scene, like the room is tinted a different color and Chris's hair blows back and the tables are turned all of a sudden because now Noelle is backing away from Chris on the couch and Chris is inching toward her as she realizes that now she's hearing the same voice that she was hearing from them during the weird route. And I just want to put a quick content warning out there right now. I'm very briefly gonna discuss themes of sexual assault, so if you're not into that, then just go ahead and skip to the time code on screen. But as Chris is inching closer to her on the couch, we can hear Noelle's thoughts just like we could in the weird route, and we're able to respond out loud to them. And she starts thinking, well, if you can hear me say this, and you say that, and you tell her that everything that happened was real. And then finally, when Chris has cornered her on the other side of the couch, they take the thorn out, which Noelle recognizes as the thorn ring, and they stick it back into her finger. And as this happens, the screen goes black, and some really interesting imagery happens on screen. When the game first came out, a rose appeared on screen, and the petals started to fall off. And to a lot of the fan base, and honestly to me, this does read as a metaphor for sexual assault, or otherwise some sort of invasion of Noelle's boundaries, or the loss of her innocence. But a few days later,
or quite literally deflowering. Ugh.
Later, the visual was then changed. So instead of the rose with the petals falling off, now there's this sort of red glass shattering effect across the screen. Both are very powerful in different ways, I think, but I can't help but think there was some intent to the original imagery. If I had to guess why it was changed, I think a lot of people were interpreting it as literal sexual assault happening, and I don't think that was true of the scene, but I think that the insinuation was pretty clear. I mean, especially with, again...
Yeah, not literal sexual assault, at least I hope, and more just a loss of innocence.
And Snowgrave is, thematically,
at least that's what
it has
I
a lot
think.
to do with forcing Chris and Noelle, regardless of their queer identities, into like a heteronormative relationship with each other. So having Chris approach Noelle on the couch and then forcibly penetrate her with a sharp object, along with the rose visual, I think it was a very intentional, like, deflowering metaphor. But again, I don't think that that's literally what happened. I think that it was more a symbol of how horribly Noelle has been violated and her loss of innocence and all that. I don't think it was literal sexual assault. But either way, I think that the new visual is also very affecting in a similar way, so it's similarly dark but without the potential for misinterpretation. What a scary scene. It was very affecting to me when I first played it.
And then there's the scene immediately afterwards where Chris, seemingly, rightfully so, throws us in the trash can in the bathroom and just starts kicking. And I'm gonna say this: if I had the money, I would try to commission like a comic of a version of the scene that I had envisioned, and I'll tell you guys here because I want to say it out loud before I forget it or something. But I had this idea that in an alternate version of the scene, Chris turns to leave or just leans against the wall to take a breather, and then out of the can you see a speech bubble appear saying, "Oh geez, it seems like I hit a mark, or I hit a nerve there." And then Chris kind of turns around in shock because this is the first time he's ever heard the soul itself speaks. And then out of the trash can you see an arm kind of reach out, like a bright red glowing arm. And then just a person, as in, us, the player, or a representation of us, kind of crawls out of the trash can with the soul visible, either on the chest or visible through semi-transparent skin or whatever have you. And then just the whole thing where seemingly in this version of the Weird Route, as I'm imagining in the comic, the player specifically went on the Weird Route specifically to mess with and hurt Chris after they found out that Chris was helping the knight in the normal route. And you can kind of end the player, I'll just call them the player, kind of goes on it's after Chris asks, why are you doing this? And the player simply says, because I don't like being tricked. If I'm going to be doing something, I'm used to going into other worlds and doing these world-changing things, helping people, doing grand actions, but I like knowing what I'm getting into in the first place. And the whole thing, they start going, I was like, oh, it got to the point where it's when I actually figured out I was controlling, a person and not just, an NPC or video game character, I started feeling sorry for you. I wanted to try to help you and not, hurt you and stuff like that, especially after, the Spamton fights, and especially after the Spamton Neo fights. But then, in Chapter 3 and 4, they discovered that Chris was working with the knight, and that infuriated them so much that they restarted the game, with what they describe as a very limited form of time travel and redid the game doing the weird route specifically to hurt Chris. And the comic ends with saying that, you know, if you want, that what I did today is only the beginnings of what I can do to Noelle. And then it basically works out that, you know, the comic ends on a cliffhanger. Don't know if it would be ever continued, but basically that, you know, I can restart this and have you remember all of this and what I, like, as in, like, you know, the weird route, and so you can remember what I can do while I'm in your skin, but I'll go back to the way things are supposed to be if you stop going against me. You know, something of that nature. I wouldn't imagine it being like a full series of like a completely rewritten version of Deltarune, but it was something that's like, I really, like, because I have a couple of artists that I'd love to commission to actually make this comic, but I just don't have the money to do it.
Very uncomfortable, and it's interesting because I think the fandom had a few interpretations of how the weird route would continue to play out. I think like the more casual side of the fandom assumed that we would continue to find ways to be killing people. Like there was this popular theory that instead of using Noelle to freeze enemies in Chapter 3, Toriel would be our partner, and then we'd be using her to kill people with fire or something like that. And then there was also this more deep into the fandom interpretation that, you know, Noelle is, because of her history with breaking games and finding glitches and whatnot, she was sort of our vessel to find ways to break the game and therefore break
the world, yeah.
And I still think there's a good chance that finding a way to subvert the prophecy is the purpose of the weird route, but it's not so much focused on Noelle's ability to break the game or find secrets. It's just about this horrible control we're exerting over Noelle. And that's made especially clear in a few other scenes later on in the route. In the scene in Chapter 4 where Rolse asks Chris to close their eyes and think about Susie, if you choose to think about Noelle instead, you just see this red pixel slowly moving around on the screen, almost like it's breathing, and it just says, "Thank you." And then at the end of the game, when Chris is lying in bed, they get another phone call, and it's from Carol, and she says that Noelle is excited to see them at the festival tomorrow. So it seems like at this point in the route, we've completely taken Noelle's agency away. It seems like she's just a vessel for whatever purpose we're working toward at this point. I've also heard some theories that the red pixel is supposed to represent a growing red soul inside of Noelle, so that maybe one day we'll be able to control her. It's all very unclear at the moment.
Oh, I never thought of that before.
Harrowing. It's harrowing stuff. And the call from Carol also calls into question, why doesn't this phone call come across the same way as the phone calls Chris was getting in the holiday house? When we're spying on Chris, you see this little speech bubble coming from the phone. You hear the words broken up. Meanwhile, at the end of the game, you're in the cage, you're still separate from Chris, but the phone call that they get just comes across in a crystal clear box. So are we supposed to assume that the person Chris was talking to on the phone is different from Carol for this reason, or not? So the last thing I wanted to touch on here is where I think my theories stand in the current Deltarune theory meta. I'll be the first to say it. Well, I guess I'm not the first to say it. The comment sections for my videos have become extremely toxic since the chapters came out. But Seven Knights is in fact dead in the water. There's no saving it.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Party. That being said, there are still things that I predicted in Seven Knights and Burger Pants Conspiracy that came true or still have the potential to come true. But the basis of the theory that Knight is a title and that there is no central knight to be the antagonist, that's wrong. I mean, we've met the Roaring Knight. They're scary as
quite
hell.
Literally, yeah.
But so far, it seems like the predictions for the Dark Worlds are holding up. Obviously, the church was a no-brainer, but I did predict that Susie made a Dark World in the church, even if just barely technically correct. But it's also
she made a Dark World in the church. There were actually several.
Also looking like Asgore is going to be a major player in the next chapter, and the Dark World's going to be in Flower King. So I think that counts as a point for me. Also, like I mentioned before, my theory about the knight silhouette being obvious because of their horns came correct, even if not in the way I thought it would. I also think that my theory that Noelle will be the quote-unquote angel that opens the angel's heaven as a Dark World is still pretty likely. There is a lot of evidence
maybe just in the weird route or something
toward player angel more so than Noelle Angel, but Noelle's associations with the angel have not gone away, and I think it's very possible
angel
that
wings
there
in her
doesn't
closet.
have to be just one angel. thinking back to Undertale, even now we don't really know exactly who the angel in the prophecy was, right? Depending on your interpretation, you could say it was Frisk, or Kara, or Azrael, or even the player in that case. So even if the player is the angel, I don't doubt that Noelle could still take on a symbolically representative angel role. Perhaps it would be different depending on the route, or maybe they both are. Especially with the revelation that dark fountains can be used to revive loved ones, I think that Noelle making a fountain to revive Rudy near the end of the story is very, very likely. We also have the fact that multiple people are confirmed to be opening Dark Worlds in this story. Like I said before, Susie did it, but Chris and the Knight seem to be on the same team, and they're both opening fountains for the same reason, so it's always possible they're now working alone. And Tenna has this really confusing dialogue where, toward the end of the chapter, when you play it without doing the Mantle side quest, Tenna mentions that the Roaring Knight would get people to watch him if he just kept the heroes busy for a while. But when you do the Mantle side quest, there's also a bit where Tenna is pleading with Chris not to kill him because he did everything they asked him to do. So that calls into attention if Chris is somehow also going by the Roaring Knight, or if they were just acting as a messenger of the Knight. But overall, it was nice while it lasted, but 7 nights, goodbye.
I didn't know that about with the mantle. Like, of course, when I played, I didn't get the mantle. So, like, the idea that... I always assumed that it was Chris made the Dark World, but then the Knight snuck in, and then they talked to Tenna. I didn't... Interesting, okay.
I appreciate you making me a YouTube micro-celebrity, but we're over. Meanwhile, though, I've been getting just as many people commenting on the Ralsei theory saying it's dead, but I honestly don't think so. I mean, of course, we have to acknowledge the fact that Ralsei immediately comes out and says that he's a Darkner, but that is really the only evidence against the theory that the new chapters supply. The reasons why I propose that Ralsei can be at least a normal Darkner still do apply, and all the reasons why he can be a Goner are still there as well.
Yeah, I mean, specifically the thing where he just appears in other Dark Worlds. I mean, I did see one theory talking about, oh, what if Rousey's actually Chris's knife and that's why they're everywhere? But I honestly, I don't know.
The thing we have to reckon with, though, is if Ralsei is a Goner, why would he say that? And there are 3 possibilities, I think, at least in my mind. Number 1 is that he's just lying. I put a lot of emphasis on Ralsei lying through omission rather than lying through explicit falsehoods in the theory, and so this explanation is my least favorite, but I just want to include it for completion's sake. Ralsei does confirm himself that he is lying through omission a lot in Chapter 4, and I think that his conflicted emotions about being a Darkner do seem genuine, so I don't think he's lying about being a Darkner, but I don't want to completely write it off. But the second option that I'm pretty compelled by is the idea that maybe Ralsei doesn't know what he truly is. Maybe after being created by Gaster, he was told he was like a regular Darkner, so he doesn't know the true nature of what he is. I do think that could be interesting for his character later on, but we also do have to reckon with the fact that a lot of Darkners tend to know what real-world object they are. For example, Queen knows she's a computer, Ram knows he's a power strip, so if Ralsei was the only Darkner who didn't know what object he was based on, that would be
very weird, yeah.
But that brings me to the third point, and the one I think is most likely. Something that I failed to consider is that maybe a Goner could just be a different type of Darkner. Just like a special kind of Darkner, you know? So even though he technically is a Darkner, him not specifying that he's a Goner is, once again, an act of lying through omission, not going into explicit detail on the true nature of what he is, which makes it feel the most likely to me. And I think a Goner being a special type of Darkner could actually work out in a few cool ways. For example, maybe the difference between a colored and a non-colored Goner is whether it's in a dark world or not, right? Like, say, a Goner in the light world is just an empty gray vessel that's not alive, but then putting it in a dark world makes it come to life and gain color. I think that could be pretty interesting.
Which the question has to be asked, what would happen to us if we were actually in our vessel? Because, you know, the Goner we were making at the beginning of Chapter 1, that was gray. So, if we were in that, and if this theory is true, would we, you know, gain color after going in the Dark World? I mean, is that the reason why Chris is blue?
But also the last segment of the Raw Save video that's completely tied to Seven Knights, that's just out of the window, which is a bummer. I was very happy with the way that last segment hit, but oh well, you can't win them all. And that's all I have to say in the new chapters, I guess. I really can't overstate how much I loved them, and I love being a fan of Toby Fox and Deltarune and being in this fandom. It's just been a blast, all the discussion and new theories and whatnot. I can't wait to see where things go from here. As for my channel, at the end of the last video, I talked about how my next theory would have been the theory that connects Gaster and Des, and also Deltarune and Undertale, and that I would have to reevaluate where that theory holds up in the modern day once the new chapters come out. My thoughts on Deltarune and Undertale's relationship remain untouched, I think. I don't think any major dents were put in that theory by the new chapters, but obviously there's a lot more to consider regarding Des nowadays. I'm not completely sure if the Gaster and Des portion of the theory is broken, but it does need to be rethought. So I'm not sure right now if I'm going to split the Gaster, Des, and Undertale Deltarune theories into 2 videos, or if I still find a way to sort of make them this one cohesive thing. The title that I actually settled on for that combination of theories is Unrelated, with a question mark, because Unrelated is an anagram of Undertale and Deltarune.
Oh,
so okay. Clever. So hopefully the Unrelated theory will still come out originally how I intended it, but before that happens, because I'm gonna have to do a lot more thinking on it now, there are gonna be a few more videos on this channel that aren't the regular theory fare. Next up is gonna be another collab with me and Snarlinger. This time we're gonna be ranking dead theories that were put to death by chapter 3 and 4 coming out. And then after that, I actually have a character analysis video.
Where can I submit? I have 6 really stupid ones I'd love to see you rate.
I won't say what character it is now, but it's going to be shorter than the average theory video, but hopefully close to the regular production quality of a theory video. So
I'm not going to complain.
And then after that comes out, I think I'm going to start working on Unrelated. So thank you so much for listening if you got this far, and now I have some Patreon shoutouts to do. And good God, there are way more.
Oh God, honestly, I mean, I've seen a couple of videos that were kind of like blanket videos about chapters 3 and 4 pop up in my feed, and I need to watch them. But so far, I think I can pretty confidently say that for a good portion of them, the main theme of these videos is just going to be chapters 3 and 4 came in with a steel chair and ruined everything. Oh God, honestly, again, it's one of those things. I said before that before chapter 3 and 4, we were in so much of like a dream state, just trying to figure out what things are, and we were in that state for so long that when we actually got, you know, the real things come in, and they were nowhere close to what we actually thought. Like, everybody was just kind of like flashbanged. Oh God, but yeah, that is definitely it, and this is going to be a long video to render down, so that is going to be fun to do later. But yeah, so that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.